On behalf of Fiji and the whole Pacific, I say, Bula Vinaka. Welcome to the 3rd Codex and Food Regulatory Forum 2026 for North America and the Southwest Pacific. Let us work together with science to shape standards and protect our future. Now, shall we begin? Let's go!
So what is our task and our target? To review all previous and upcoming Codex committees, aiming to prepare for the upcoming Codex Alimentarius Commission CAC 49. So for this purpose, let's go through these Codex, the list of these Codex committees. And as we know, for this year, the Commission is coming back to end of June, early July. And at the same time, we had a Commission the end of last year, but we still have 2 committees that we're bringing with us from the past season and that will be brought in front of the Commission this year or this upcoming CAC 49. These 2 committees are the CCSCH8, so the Codex Committee on Spices and Culinary Herbs, and the CCFH 55, the Codex Committee on Food Hygiene, the 55th session that met end of last year, 2025. And for the new season, we already achieved and completed 3 meetings, 3 committees. CCFO 29, the Codex Committee on Fats and Oils, that met in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, since a month ago, approximately. And CCMAS, the Codex Committee on Methods of Analysis and Sampling, that already met also the previous month. CCRVDF that met last week, actually, and the report was adopted just a few days ago, last Friday. And we're looking towards and for CCFA, coming in a few weeks. Then CCFL. We have the Codex Committee on Fisheries and Fishery Products meeting throughout the month by correspondence. And we will be aiming also for the Codex Committee on Food Labeling. And then we have our Executive Committee, that for sure, and our Codex Alimentarius Commission CAC 49 between 6 July till 10 July 2026. So that's our the whole season, what we already achieved and what we're aiming to achieve before the Codex Alimentarius Commission. So normally, what is the strategy in similar presentations? Of course, it's not to go into technical discussions. That's not the aim. Of course, it's not to review everything and every discussions. It's more looking to priorities, some priority items of interest for countries, for region, so for regional, some regional interests and national interests. Try to look at the conclusions, reach out during the committee. This way, we can better prepare our coordination, whether national or regional, and even interregional coordination ahead of the Codex Alimentarius Commission. And as you know, of course, the aim during the Codex Alimentarius Commission is not to also reopen technical discussions, but at the same time, we can mention a lot of examples where we used the platform of the Codex Alimentarius Commission to reopen a discussion, to stop the adoption of a standard, to put again the standard into discussion, and I can give you a lot of examples that we helped to coordinate during the previous years. One of them would be the standard on fresh dates. So the Near East region and the Arab region stopped the adoption of the standard during the Commission. And we brought back, and the region brought back, of course, after the agreement and decision of the Commission. And they tried, and then they worked on compiling data. Again, analyzing the data, submitting the data, going back to the committee in Mexico, and then the standard was adopted during the last commission. So that's one example. So we always have this platform during the commission in case we have some highly urgent or priority things to mention. Okay, so that's our aim. I will try to go through some items of interest, and we will stop after every committee So we have few slides, maximum 3 slides for every committee. And then I will give you the floor. So if you have other items of interest you would like us to discuss, we could do that. If you would like to add more comments about the items I presented, so it will be an occasion to try to coordinate and to communicate among each other to be better prepared for the upcoming commission. So if we go back to the end of last year, a very interesting and important committee met, the Codex Committee on Spices and Culinary Herbs, and a lot of interesting discussions during this committee. First, we had a lot of standards under discussion. And I'm listing here 4 standards related to spices and 1 related to herbs. So if we look, we discussed the standard on vanilla. The discussion on the standard was going for the past few sessions. And the CCSCH agreed to advance the draft for adoption at step 8. So during the upcoming commission, the commission will endorse and validate this decision or this conclusion to adopt the standard at step 8. Another standard on large cardamom, also it was advanced, or the conclusion was to advance it for adoption at step 5/8, so final adoption. A lot of key issues were discussed, and as you know, for these commodity standards, and we will mention this in the upcoming slides, for CCSCH we have a template for the standards. So they agreed on a template, and they always aim and try to update this template. That's a very interesting, way of working the standards. So they set a template for those standards. And always, the key discussions are related to the same aspects. Then we had a standard on cinnamon. Unfortunately, the standard was returned to step 2/3, meaning redrafting of the standard and recirculating the standard for the first round of comments. Why? Because during the discussions, participants and member countries and observers were not satisfied by the text that was presented. And of course, if you check the report, you can find all the details about the discussions. Then we had also the standard on coriander. This standard was actually also advanced for adoption at step 5/8, the final adoption. One proposal regarding a herb, the sweet marjoram, it was the conclusion was to advance it to step 5, meaning we will have another round of comments. So it will be circulated under step 6 for another round of comments, and hopefully discussed under step 7 in the upcoming CCSCH session. So that was the first interesting part of the decisions of CCSCH. Of course, the other famous item that we've been discussing since a while now, and that emanated from this committee, so related to the use of country of origin and country of harvest. And this issue or this request emanated from a standard related to this particular committee. That's why, and then CCFL was tasked to endorse, and that's why we've been assisting to some questions back and forth between CCFL and CCSCH. So we're aiming in the upcoming session of CCFL to have a final say regarding this issue, and we can discuss it further, of course. So during this, the CCSCH, the past CCSCH, for this one, I copied, pasted the conclusion from the report, okay, because it's a critical item and discussion. So if you allow me to read it and to go through it. So we had, of course, two views or 2 opinions supporting for the reason of transparency, authenticity, fraud prevention, of course, coming from major producing countries related to some particular spices and herbs of quality. So we're speaking here about saffron, we're speaking about vanilla and others. And of course, some concerns from other member countries. So the conclusion, CCSCH 8 agreed to request CCFL 49 to consider A, clarifying subsection 4.5.2 of CXS 1/1985, specifically with respect to change the nature of the food. because as you know, we discussed it previously, the definition of the country of origin. So here we're speaking about the section related to the definition of the country of origin, stating that it is the last country where the food underwent some changes or some substantial changes that induced a change to the nature of the food. So they are requesting CCFL to provide more clarifications regarding this, to consider the possibility to further refine this subsection, and specifically change the nature of the food, or provide guidance on the application of this subsection. B, providing additional guidance by defining or bringing more clearer definitions related to this country of origin, COO, or country of harvest, COH. So the question is brought back to CCFL. CC Exec and CAC to consider providing also further guidance on how CC fixed texts could be best integrated into commodity committee standards to provide for more integrated approach to the inclusion of other fair trade related tools. So that's the exact wording of the report. And how to address issues such as food fraud, traceability, and product tracing. So if we conclude on this, after debates and discussions during CCSCH, we have other questions now addressed to mainly CCFL, but also to CCFix in order to bring more clarification regarding this issue. And the last item I want to mention related to CCSCH was a very interesting item, actually, tackling or dealing with the issue of data. And we will be discussing a lot this issue of data in the upcoming days. So they had a discussion paper, I think developed by the United States of America, mentioning that we have an issue related to spices, the data that we have, any level of data required, because as you know, for the development of standards, depending on the commodity, depending on the kind of standard, we have some data requirements, right? So if we're speaking about a provision related to a maximum level or a maximum residue limit, and we're submitting data for JECFA evaluation, we have certain requirements for these data. If we're speaking about a commodity standard, to develop a standard on a spice or a herb, we have other kind of data requested. So here we're speaking more about the trade data. So we need more quality data, okay? So another kind of data. The issue that was mentioned here is that we and India is pushing, and we are aiming to develop more standards, covering more spices, more herbs. But at the same time, we are not able to access easily what we call desegregated data. What we're accessing are more aggregated or segregated data, meaning data representative for a generic class of spices, not data targeting a specific spice by itself. Okay, so they are receiving data for, let's say, dried herbs, something like in general. And it's difficult to have this specific data related to spices, because normally we mix them. It's not easy to have individual trade data, individual quality data, etc. So the proposal was to, and which is now more and more implemented by CCSCH, is to go to group standards, which is a great practice, actually. So instead of standardizing every spice, merging together a group of spices and trying to get a standard for the group of spice. So this way, we are covering more spices, at the least for the first step. We're standardizing more spices, we're facilitating trade, we're harmonizing and standardizing quality, etc., for a group of standards. And then, if we need to be more specific for a very specific kind of spice, we can develop, of course, a particular standard. Okay, so that's the issue here. And they decided and they agreed towards this direction, to always try to develop a standard for a group. And it will be much easier to get data related to this group of standards. So that's the strategic decision of the work related to CCSCH. So that was the most interesting stuff from CCSCH 8. So please feel free if you have any comments, any additions before we move forward to CCFH. We have a long list, so let's try to make it as much as less boring possible. Yes, please. Alicia, can I, or I can move. Can I please ask for a microphone? Thank you. Yes.
Can you just give us any information on how a group is determined? What are the characteristics that determine whether or not you're in or out?
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you for this question. Yeah, actually, they have they already worked on this classification. Okay, so they set the classification requirement, and we can know now the list of groups that we can aim for. So they have even they set like a strategic plan, a strategic aim for groups and commodities to be standardized. So yes, they have some requirements for groups, and we know the list. We have an idea about the list of groups. Because the issue in CCSCH, they were planning for their work. So they were doing a good planning, trying to aim for a continuous work, not to find the agenda of the committee empty. So they were trying to plan for upcoming work. So yes, they defined some requirements, and we have groups with titles for groups, and we have a classification. Now, what we always find unfortunate in Codex, if I may say, is that we are still seeing committees having their own classification, which I find that a bit unfortunate, because we have different classifications. CCFA has a classification system. So every committee, then when committees need to talk among each other, we might face some issues related to classifications, but that's like a generic comment about this. Yes, please. And that's why they mentioned, and they had a detailed discussion about the data, because the issue is very easily the lack of data. And then we have to plan for the upcoming meeting, and we have to have an agenda for the meeting. So we need data. We need to aim for new standards for the work of the committee to continue. Yes, please.
Yeah, in terms of the vanilla, you feel according to FAO, it's like one crop, one country, product for us to
Yes.
plant in PNG, and vanilla becomes a very important commodity for PNG, and because of that, under the ANSAT program, we were able to develop the national standard for vanilla, and it was unfortunate that some of our officers from the Department of Trade was attending meetings in India on CCNASWP Codex Committee on Spice and Culinary Herbs. But once it's good to know that the standard is going to stay, and once that standard is adopted by CAC in this coming session, CAC 49, as that 49, and we should be able to maybe look back at our national standard and make adjustments to be in line with the national standards of the Codex Committee. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Thank you. Yeah, in fact, it took some quite discussions, the standard on vanilla, and finally this year, hopefully. And I missed to mention that, of course, obvious that all these standards should go then through the endorsement from all the different horizontal committees, that's for sure, regarding the labeling provisions, the methods of analysis, the food additives provisions, etc. Okay, so any more comment about this? It is a very important, we understand and notice more and more the importance of commodity standards. The horizontal committees are, of course, very important, but then when we participate more and more to commodity committees, we understand more the task here and what's at stake. So the discussions are normally tough during these committees. Okay, so that was end of October, I guess, or 2025. Then we had the commission, CAC 48, but CCSCH was not tabled on the agenda of the CAC 48. After CAC 48, we had the meeting of CCFH, and some Yes, some information. Just wait if you give me 1 second. Okay, so now for CCFH 55. Also some interesting headings discussed during the session, to my understanding, but then of course the agenda enclosed other items also of discussion. So the first one, guidelines for the safe use and reuse of water in food production and processing. It's been under discussion. So this year it was, it targeted the 2 annexes, 2 for fish and fishery products, and 4 for the water fit for purpose assessment, safety management, and technologies for recovery and treatment of water for reuse. These are the titles of 2 appendices or annexes that were discussed. And the CCFH decided or concluded to forward these 2 annexes to CAP 49 for adoption at step 5.8. Okay, so it's always interesting to know what is for final adoption, but more interesting to know what is not for final adoption, to have the possibility to follow up on and engage in electronic working group, reply to circular letters, etc. Also, I wanted to mention this since the Committee on Fisheries and Fishery Products is meeting or will be meeting by correspondence. And since it was related to fish, proposed that CCFFP may consider whether it was necessary to update the code of practice for fish and fishery products and other Codex texts. So that's always in the aim of harmonizing Codex texts, okay? And we will see in other committees also. They are putting much effort in this harmonization and alignment, and it's very important. We don't want to have a Codex text under CCFFP with provisions different than the Codex text adopted under CCFH. And it's not easy. We totally understand it. It's a very laborious work, but it's very important to do it. And hopefully with the digitalization of Codex outputs more and more, it will be much easier to go through this task. Proposed the draft revision of the guidelines on the application of general principles of food hygiene to the control of viruses in food. Okay, very interesting item. They decided to return the proposed draft guideline to step 2. So that's interesting also for the upcoming season to engage. So you will have the chance to review a redrafted version and to provide comments in the forum. But then also to provide comments ahead of the meeting and during the meeting of the committee. Okay, and always this committee based on the GEMRA scientific opinion. Another item, item 8, proposed the draft revision of the guidelines for the control of Campylobacter and Salmonella in chicken meat. That was also a very interesting item for discussion. And CCFH noted that all issues had been addressed and that the guidelines were ready to advance in the step procedure to step 5.8. So done with this one, and CAP 49 will be endorsing and adopting this paper. Listeria monocytogenes and ready-to-eat food, agenda item 9. So they agreed to revise and advance the guidelines also to step 5/8. So done with this paper. They had some recent GEMRA advice, so they discussed, they incorporated it, and they agreed to advance. They adopted updated definitions of ready-to-eat foods. Okay, so always, again, we have a definition for ready-to-eat food under CCCF. We have MLs developed for ready-to-eat, for food for further processing, and here we have a definition. So hopefully, honestly, I didn't read the exact definition in this committee, but I hope that the definitions are aligned. But of course, also, I could understand and that we might have different vision according to each committee regarding to the definitions. Okay, so that's this ready-to-eat food is also important. We have a lot of definitions. Always the alignment thing, so strengthen always alignment. Do not adopt new texts not aligned with previous adopted texts. That's it, revised annexes structure and content to improve usability and risk-based approaches. So they did a lot of effort related to this agenda item, and it will be adopted at step 5. Okay, so that was mostly the major outcomes related to CCFH. Yes, please, Scott.
I just wanted to add to that. I think there's, and it's just a plug for some work that Australia is involved in, co-chairing, I believe, and they agreed to start some new work, or certainly at least to do some more work to bring back next time on looking at freezing temperatures required in cold chain and food transport, retail, and what have you. With the view being that perhaps it's unnecessary to freeze down to -18, and if we can show that food is safe and keeps well at higher temperatures, then we can save money and energy in food systems. So just a plug for that work, and then if anyone is interested in that, to feel free to reach out, and we would like to have as many people involved who would like to be involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you. Yes, please. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to go back to your slide on, I think it's that one, reuse of water in food production. While we continue to make standards, and I guess it's still being debated at step, it hasn't reached step 8. The industries are already upfront. They're already upfront and implementing this, what we are trying to propose. I'm just saying this because someone else got caught out few years back, because the industry was upfront, but the regulatory body was quite behind in trying to catch up with when it comes to monitoring what's actually happening on the ground. So it can be catchy for the regulatory bodies to really implement these standards when industries are already like 10 steps ahead. So we nearly sort of didn't make it through the European Union audit. So we have to be very critical at that moment to take corrective actions in order that we meet their requirements. And I just want to add on to, I think Scott did mention something on freezing temperatures, -18. In terms of fish and fishery products as well, the EU is already 1 step ahead, or even 10 steps ahead in implementing that -18 or colder in terms of storage. And one of the things that caught out many of the also fishing industry is it has to be applied to vessels that are currently fishing. So it's quite a bit tricky. That regulation came into force in January, so it caught out many of the fishing companies that have fishing vessels. How do they implement that requirement to meet what they wanted? So it's quite challenging for fishing companies in this part of the world where their vessels, they have to send it to places that they will be docked and readjust what the requirements say. I'm just trying to share from a practical perspective.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Other colleagues? Thank you so much. Okay, so that brings us to CCFO for what was a very here I can use perhaps Scott animated a meeting or committee. So it was very interesting to attend all the discussions during this committee. A lot of interesting items were discussed, very important, related to very important issues. Yes, sir. That's it. But the most, perhaps the highest interesting items, and I could say also, I don't know if let's say not a lot of discussions went forward. Let's put it this way. Okay, so we had a lot of interesting discussions, but after all, if we want to conclude on the overall conclusions, let's put it this way: we still need to do more effort in this regard, hopefully, in order to bring these standards to adoption in the upcoming session. Item 5, proposed draft revisions to Codex standards on fats and oils to reduce trans fatty acid intake. So that was a very important highlight of the discussions. So CCFO 29 agreed to return the proposed draft revisions to step 2/3 on this regard. So we're back to the redrafting. So if you attended, some of our colleagues here attended the meeting. So we had a lot of discussions on a lot of paragraphs, a lot of provisions, and then that was the conclusion. So again, very interesting to engage on this piece of work. Redrafting, recirculated for comments, and engage also ahead of the upcoming CCFO. So we have an electronic working group shared by Saudi Arabia and co-chaired by the European Union to revise the definitions, the essential composition provisions, etc. Item 6, proposed draft standard for microbial omega-3 oils. Also, it was a very interesting discussion. CCFO 29 agreed to forward the draft standard for microbial omega-3 oils to CAC 49 for adoption at step 5. So as I was mentioning, step 5, another chance also to debate, to discuss, to bring more comments, more views towards the development of this standard. Forward the provisions for labeling and methods of analysis to CCFL and CCMAS for endorsement. As we were saying, always we have to go through the endorsement procedures. Request CCCF. So here you will see a lot of requests for horizontal committees. Request CCCF to consider extending the mLs of arsenic and lead for edible fats and oils to microbial omega-3 oils. So that's an interesting request, right? We always say that we're developing a commodity standard, but then which mLs we will be using and which mL will be we can apply to this commodity if we don't have this commodity mentioned, or let's say a similar commodity or a commodity from the same group or family, etc. So here they have a clear request to explore the way of extending the use of an mL to this oil. Forward the food additive provisions to CCFA, and again, as I was mentioning, the CCFA classification. So every time we need to have the food, the commodity classified under a particular classification. And we have always some requests coming back and forth from CCFA trying to say that perhaps we revised this and perhaps we think that this commodity should not be classified under this. So we had this issue in CC Near East where we have a mixed food called mixed za'atar. So normally we classified it under the herb, the dried herb, which is the major component. But then when they restudied the composition, it's a mixture of a lot of things. So we have sesame seeds, we have, and to a higher percentage. We're not speaking about 5 or 10%. So it could go towards more than 50% of the final mix. And then CCFA proposed another classification for it, for example. So here they are asking to provide information about where to classify this microbial omega-3 oil. And another, every time, I'm not mentioning this every time, but every time we go back to step 2/3, meaning re-establishment of an electronic working group to work on the drafting, etc. So it's always as we said, as Professor Sam also introduced, always interesting not only to follow up, engage in the discussions, register in the electronic working groups, try to provide comments through the forum. If not, we will have another opportunity, of course, ahead of the committee meeting to reply to a circular letter related to the proposal. Then we will still have an opportunity to provide a CRD if we're not participating, and if we are participating, to take the floor and comment verbally. So a lot of chances to provide our opinions. Okay, so we do not have a reason to say that we were not brought to understand how or where we could bring our opinion. So we have several layers where we can bring our opinion. And the very famous item on olive oil. So that was also a very important item of discussion. We were not discussing the standard because the standard was adopted during the previous commission, the standard on olive oil, which was a piece of work that took a lot of debate, as you know, related to this very important commodity. So when we speak about olive oil, it's a highly, highly important commodity worldwide. Of course, not produced everywhere, but it is very important, consumed a lot, and very specific commodity. And now we're seeing new countries, even from the region, Australia and other countries, engaging more in activities related to this particular commodity. Two discussions. We had two discussions. Again, not related to the standard, but related to potential future work of updating the standard or not. The first one, during the last CCFO, we had a proposal coming from member countries to try to check or investigate on some quality attributes, components in the olive oil, particularly two of them, the pyrophyophytene, PPP, and 1,2-diglycerides, 1,2-DAGs, two particular attributes in the olive oil. So the request was to collect data on these two attributes in olive oil, and then try to task an ad hoc expert group to analyze this data collected in order to see whether we could use them as a quality indicator and be potentially introduced in the standard. And as you know, when we speak about olive oil and speaking about a new quality attribute, that's a big, big, big thing we are doing. Okay, it's not it's not an easy thing because olive oil is a commodity produced in different parts of the world, in different regions, and the quality here, I'm speaking about the quality of the oil, is influenced by different parameters and factors, pedoclimatic factors, genetic factors related to the tree itself, to the species itself, etc. So going to say that we have a quality attribute that is repeatable, reproducible, and we could apply as a quality attribute for all the production of this commodity all over the world, that's a very, very, very high thing we are aiming for, okay? Nevertheless, that was a request. Data was collected, and the debate was whether the data was enough or not. So that was the debate during CCFO. It's always very important to understand the exact debate and objective to be able to engage. So the debate was whether the data collected was enough or not, and then if it is enough, to task who to analyze the data, who to be tasked or tasked. So after a lot of debates, etc., they agreed on a consensus conclusion that the data collected is somehow enough. We will be, CCFO will be tasking an ad hoc expert group from FAO to start engaging and analyzing the data collected. At the same time, keeping the door open for new data to be submitted until this ad hoc expert committee kicks off its first meeting. So that's always interesting to see how also decisions can be formulated and trying to reach a consensus. And that's Codex. That's what is beautiful about Codex, right? So we said that data is enough. At the same time, we keep the door open to have more data, and we task the FAO ad hoc expert group to start analyzing and reporting back to CCFO 30 in order to see whether we could rely on these quality attributes to be incorporated as quality attributes. Okay, so it was a very typical, interesting case. The second one, the second part that was also very active, was related to here actually a footnote already adopted in the standard. We said the standard on olive oil was adopted. So they adopted a footnote, a particular footnote, detailing what we call a decision tree. You know, you're familiar with decision trees. So we have a decision tree. If this parameter is above this limit, then the second parameter should be below this limit. Then the third parameter should be. So we have a decision tree in order to say here that the oil is authentic. So it is very critical. We are speaking about the authenticity of a commodity that is very regarded or very seen for its authenticity. When we speak about extra virgin olive oil, and then we speak about virgin olive oil, we have classifications, etc. So here we're not speaking about the classifications, we're speaking about virgin olive oils, and we're speaking about their authenticity, whether they are pure olive oils or mixed with refined oils and other oils. So it's a very critical thing. And it seems that Syria, the Arab Republic of Syria, brought this issue, that their oils, a big percentage of their oils, up to 40% of their true production, their authentic production, would be classified non-authentic according to this decision tree. And Syria is considered as the biggest olive oil producer in the Eastern Mediterranean part of the Mediterranean Sea. Okay, so they brought this, and through a lot of meetings, through the CAC, etc. And during CCFO, so they got the conclusion of the creation of an electronic working group, tasked to define the data requirements and to collect data again, in the aim of updating this decision tree. And then during discussions, we noticed that a lot of other countries have the same problem. Some of them were not analyzing for these parameters from the start, or they do not export a lot of their oils, etc. So anyways, it had a lot of consensus during after a lot of debates and side meetings, and CCFO accepted to create this electronic working group, co-chaired also by Australia. So it is shared by Syria, of course, the proponent. It's a very typical and good example, and then it is co-shared by Australia, Tunisia, which is the second largest, so the largest producer in the other part of the Mediterranean Sea, and by the IOC, the International Olive Council. So here we have an intergovernmental body co-sharing an electronic working group. Okay, so that gives you an idea about the importance of the work that will be undertaken under this electronic work. And I guess, okay, and then a lot of interesting new work proposals also for your future engagement, if you think you're interested about particular new work. So they accepted to create an electronic working group and to start with the work on shea butter to be included in the generic standard for named vegetable oils. Not to start the new work related to including virgin coconut oil in the standard, because they thought due to identified gaps that would need further clarification. So it's interesting, for example, to follow up on this item, trying to bring it back in the upcoming CCFO to have it accepted as a new work. Okay. Then they accepted a proposal, and believe me, the new work proposals are related a lot to the level of preparedness, the level of previous coordination, the level of readiness during the meeting, and of course, to the scientific merit of the proposal, that's for sure. They accepted, for example, a proposal from Iran to amend a particular level of stearic acid in a very particular interesting oil, which is the high oleic acid sunflower seed oil. And they accepted to do that, not in an electronic working group, but through a circular letter, because they said that it's just one provision we are amending, no need to have an electronic working group, so they will circulate. If you are interested by this, follow up on the circular letter. And they accepted to go forward with the new work on buckthorn pulp oil and seed buckthorn seed oil. So these normally will be endorsed during CAC 49, but if you are interested in some aspects, do vocalize it. Give more support also to the endorsement of this new work proposal, etc. To the readiness to provide data. It's always interesting to hear that, yes, we are ready, we have some data, and we are ready to provide some data. So that was CCFO. Any additional comments or any thought, any idea? Some particular interests for the region? Yes, Tanya, please. What do you think about the proposal for virgin coconut oil and the...
Thank you. Yeah, I was just about to comment on that. I noted that you mentioned that the committee had agreed not to start new work on that. In the region, well, for Vanuatu, virgin coconut oil is it's an upcoming product in a way. There are quite a lot of people producing that at the moment. We are discussing developing a national virgin coconut oil standard. However, if this is brought up in the international arena, would be good as well. So yeah, Vanuatu's keen on that. The virgin coconut oil, it's a big thing, and I think all our other neighboring countries as well. I'm sure virgin coconut oil is a big thing. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's interesting also that Fiji shares the same as well as Vanuatu. What would be your stance on this further clarification of this standard feedback or proposal?
Yes, thank you. Yes, we could go back to the report in order to see in details why it wasn't accepted, and then which we could do today right away. Okay, after our presentation, we could go back to the report and try to read this particular part if you're interested, more interested in it, and try to organize a certain coordination in order to aim for the upcoming. So for now, our only chance again would be presented in the upcoming CCFO 30 to bring that back. We could check which country was the proponent for this proposal, etc. So I will look at further details and I will share it with you. Thank you. It's always interesting to go back to the report in order to get them in details. Yes, yeah, please.
I can add a little bit of context to this as I was present
Yes.
at the CCFO meeting. So, and you're right, we should probably check the report, but from what I gather, it was the Philippines who proposed this. So there is an existing standard on coconut oil, but the parameters didn't include all the virgin coconut oil. So if there is some data on virgin coconut oil in order to amend the existing standard, that would be, I think, probably a really good outcome. There was a concern about having a standard for coconut oil and a standard for virgin coconut oil because of the way that the standard, this is the part I think we would need to go back to. It had to do with whether or not it was valid because of processing in order to have its own standard. All that to say, if there is data from the region, that would be fantastic, I think, to submit, and I think that would probably have a really good rationale for amending the existing standard and making sure that this is included.
Thank you, Alice. Thank you. Yeah, this could be an outcome of our discussion during this session to put it as a name. Yes, please. But always, as Alison mentioned, we need data. So it's always good to support a proposal, but then.
Yeah, in some of my colleagues from Vanuatu, I think in the Pacific we grow a lot of coconuts, and I think virgin coconut oil is one of the major commodity that is you can find in the Pacific as well. So I think we have to revisit that proposal, and I think that's as CCFO to reconsider if there's a possibility to do the basic coconut oil because, or we can also propose it from the CCNASWP. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have a consensus.
So actually, collectively, I know we have a short time frame with these 3 days. There are focus commodities that we have to look into. I think through our regional coordinator, this is one of the aspects that we want as an outcome from this. I know we have a short time in this, maybe share later on what needs to be going forward.
Of course.
Just for my own clarity, we're talking about data to support if we want the state to build or revise. What type of data?
That's an excellent question, always. So here, Alison could help me also if you have a few ideas, but I think we need more, we need quality data first, right? Quality attributes, compositional data, because actually this, since it wasn't brought forward, I didn't dive into the details, but which we could do, that's for sure.
Right, thank you. I think we would need to check. From my recollection, it was some of the parameters. So like what processing, what would the parameters be of the different sterols, that kind of
yes.
thing that could fall under the standard, because I think the problem was that there was a certain type of virgin coconut oil that was being produced in the Philippines that didn't meet the existing standard for coconut oil. So if there is more data for quality, quality, thanks, Nancy. Yeah.
Thank you, Alison. Thank you. And I guess Prof. Sam have the report for us.
I guess I think actually it was a mix of things. One of them was that the committee has also a heavy agenda, and I think the discussion paper did not contain a good elaboration as to the importance of the work. So the concerns, as is documented in the report right now, what they are saying is that whatever was included in the discussion paper was not sufficient to indicate that basically the standard is needed. Particularly what they're saying is that the current standard that exists perhaps would offer enough flexibility to address essentially virgin coconut oil. And I don't think that demonstration was made that there is enough additional data that would allow to discriminate between whatever is already standardized in Codex and the new proposal for virgin coconut oil. So I think it's that type of data that is required, and that seems to have been not fully documented in what was proposed. And I think the second argument, and that may have been, I wasn't there, so Alison, both you and Amin were there, it seemed to weigh in even more the fact that the CCFO 30 had already a heavy agenda, yes. And therefore the discussion paper was further delayed. So which means that I think the window of opportunity is still there. Picking it up from what the Philippines has already introduced, identify those areas that would allow to make the case for this specific category to be created, because in this case there is already standardization. So the question is, do we need to have a new standard, or potentially to amend the other standard to create a subcategory?
Thank you, Sam. So one more reason to aim for this kind of interest and coordination work. And as we said, and as Sam mentioned, yes, I do recall a bit, but because the new work proposals were the last item, right? So we discussed them lastly, and it was after a few days with very heavy discussions and a lot of new electronic working groups also, as you see, created for new work proposals. So it needed more clarifications. So one more reason to push forward for the upcoming CCFO, if you agree that it's an interest for the region. Okay. Any more comments about CCFO? And as you see, as I told you, the first place, it's a very interesting committee. So it's one of, I think, one of the most interesting commodity committees. Now, I will go, of course, I know we have some analytical chemists between us and among us, but of course we will not go into the details regarding this very technical committee. But at the same time, I always try, since I am an analytical chemist, Prof. Sam is an analytical chemist, so we have always this aim, this objective to demystify this part of very technical committees. Of course they are technical. Of course we need experts to provide the proper information or opinion. But at the same time, it's always interesting and important to follow up, because as you know, if we start from the commodity standards, we have a section, very important section, about the methods of analysis and sampling. And here, let me start by saying this, and I think that's the most important information for you to know as a community. CCMAS, as other horizontal committees, you know, for CCCF, the contaminants, we have one standard for contaminants in feed and food, contaminants and toxins in feed and food, right? Unfortunately, we do not have it as an online database. Don't understand why till now. For the contaminants, we do not have an online database in Codex, so hopefully they can hear us. For pesticide residues, vet drug residues, additives, we have the online databases. So hopefully they mentioned that they will be aiming to transfer this standard to an online database. So just to say that we have for additive GSFA, the general standard for food additives. For the methods of analysis and sampling, we have a generic standard. So the aim here, the strategic aim that was endorsed by CAC, is to make this standard the only reference for methods of analysis and sampling. So now we will be studying in the afternoon the first draft of our commodity standards. For the labeling, you mentioned the generic standard. For the hygiene, you mentioned a generic standard. For the methods of analysis, up till now, recently, no, we were still putting some tables with the provisions to be measured and the ISO AOAC different methods of reference, etc. No, the idea from now on is to put the reference to the generic standard under CCMAS, and you will go to this generic standard and find your method of analysis and sampling. But in order to do that, this alignment work, a huge harmonization and alignment work should be performed. And that's what I will be mentioning here. The huge effort CCMAS is doing in this harmonization work, because we need to harmonize, make sure that what is mentioned in the commodity standard, as in terms of methods I'm speaking, and sampling plans, is harmonized and aligned with the generic standard and CCMAS 234, I guess, the standard. And at the same time, if they are aligned, stop mentioning the details here and reference the generic one. That's the idea. And they are aiming to transform this generic one to an online database. So we could go search, and we have an online platform in order to get our sampling plan, hopefully. Okay, and they are aiming for that. So that's very important. That was a strategic decision taken by CCMAS. So if we are developing a new, perhaps try to start applying, implementing this, not mentioning the details. And in case you do not find the methods or a reference to your commodity in the methods, you will be proposing, the electronic working group will be suggesting methods for endorsement in CCMAS, and these methods will be added to the generic standard on methods of analysis and sampling. And in our commodity standard, we will mention the reference of this standard. Why? In order in the future to avoid doing the alignment work again. Because the generic paper, the generic standard is always updated. And the commodity standard, and specifically if it is a regional commodity standard, we forget to update it. So that's the issue. And you know, in analytical chemistry, we have always new updates, new techniques, new technologies, etc. So that's the whole idea of the work of CCMAS. Okay? In terms of few details, as for CCFL, as for CCFA, CCMAS has a very important work to endorse methods of analysis. What do we mean by endorse methods of analysis and sampling? As we do endorse labeling provisions, as we do endorse additives provisions. Okay, so here we have this electronic working group on endorsement meeting with highly technical experts in the field. they will study the proposed method of analysis for the particular commodity. They will check if the method was validated for this commodity. Which level of validation, etc. And they will say, okay, that's good. The validation scheme of this method covers this commodity, so we endorse it. And it's a very important thing when CCNAS says we endorse this method. It's an official endorsement. Plus, which is CCNAS is not doing a lot. CCNAS has the mandate of developing the method. They can also work on the method. Okay, but for now they are more endorsing. And when I say endorsing methods, for all of us working in the standards, we know we have reference ISO methods, we have AOAC methods, we have EPA methods, so they are known, the methods in analytical chemistry. So they had requests from CC Asia, CC Near East, CCFO, CCSCH, CCCF to endorse. And hopefully in the upcoming sessions, they will have requests from NASWP to endorse some analytical methods for commodities. One interesting thing, CCCF, the work related to mycotoxins, they endorsed sampling plans and methods related to total aflatoxins, ochratoxin, and spices. Always interesting to follow up. They had an issue, also a technical one, so we're not going to details, but for the technical people among us, they had an issue, a very interesting one from analytical chemistry perspective related to aflatoxins, because we have a maximum level for total aflatoxins, AFT, and we have maximum levels for individual things sometimes. And in terms of analysis, when we do analyze, we analyze normally now with the new sophisticated techniques, right? When we do analyze our mycotoxins using LCMS and LCMS-MS techniques, we do analyze individual aflatoxins, and then we sum the individual ones in order to have the total, and we compare it to the maximum level, right? So they had an issue related to what we call numeric performance criteria here, between individual analysis and the total analysis. So we can go, if someone is interested, of course, I can give him more details about this. But it's important to know when we say NPCs in CCNAS, we're speaking about a numeric performance criteria. So what are the minimum requirement for a method to be acceptable and suitable for a particular analysis? So here we speak about LODs, LOQs, repeatability requirements, okay, for all the validation stuff. Okay, and then an interesting, of course, if you are interested also to look at this, they had a discussion related to total protein in quinoa. Okay, so again, can we implement a standard if we do not do the analysis? So it's true, it is a technical committee, but that's one of the most important thing. We want to implement a provision, a regulatory provision. We need to agree on how to analyze in order to implement, right? So they had a debate related to and it's considered as a simple analysis when we speak about total proteins in a commodity. You know, the analytical method is simple, but how to implement it for a certain commodity, which numeric performance criteria, and then because it will have regulatory impacts, right? We will analyze and then we will accept, reject. It's very important to understand the details related to those techniques and analysis. And then quickly, as I said, they had a huge alignment work. Okay, alignment work. As we said, alignment is to compare between the commodity, what is mentioned in the commodity standard, and the general standard for methods of analysis and sampling. And really, they are doing an amazing job. It's not easy to take all the methods and compare them and try to it's really a very important. So very quickly, what they did, they worked on, so if you are interested, I invite you please to go and have a look on the results. They worked on workable packages, they called them. The first one they finished was on fruits and fruit juices. Okay, they worked on fruits and fruit juices. Sorry, before that, they finished the work I mentioned again on, that's perhaps interesting, on fish and fishery products, fats and oils, cereal, pulses, and legumes. They finished this revision. So they are not here discussing new stuff. They are revising, aligning, and if we have, for example, an updated method, they are saying that's an outdated method. we're just bringing the new AOIC method. That's all. No policy discussions. On fruit and fruit juices, still working on it. Cocoa and chocolate, working on it. Sugar and honey, working on it. So they defined workable packages and they are reviewing and aligning. A very interesting also item, also related to CCFL, the upcoming session of CCFL, regarding PAL, precautionary allergen labeling. So CCMAS, so since we are preparing for CCFL, we need to review this and be well prepared. We have an item, then once we discuss the upcoming agenda for CCFL, I will leave the floor for our CCFL secretary present with us here to brief us more. But here just mentioning that CCMAS had a request from CCFL asking them to provide advice about proper and suitable analytical methods that could be used in the context of the analysis of allergens and gluten in food commodities, because the decision that was taken and will be taken within CCFL is to make it mandatory to perform a qualitative or quantitative risk assessment before having the possibility of the use of the PAL, so may contain the precautionary allergen labeling. Since we need to perform a quantitative risk assessment, we need to have occurrence data, the concentrations of these residual allergens cross-contaminating this food, etc. And they asked CCMAS to provide a list of analytical methodologies. First, the question was, do we have proper analytical methodologies? Because here, we're not analyzing at higher levels. We're analyzing at a contamination level. So my allergen or my gluten, I'm analyzing it at contamination level. So when we speak about gluten, the highest acceptable concentration to call our food gluten-free is 20 milligram per kilograms, 20 ppm. So we're analyzing at relatively low, what we call action levels. So the task was to check my analytical techniques, compare to the action levels, and say, yes, this analytical technique could see this level or the levels below the action level, the threshold. Otherwise, if we cannot see below the threshold, we cannot implement, okay, this threshold. So CCMAS prepared a reply for CCFL, and actually we supported also the reply, and CCMAS endorsed the reply. So hopefully the reply will be clear enough for the upcoming discussion. So now we have a reply sent to CCFL. And a last idea also, if you wish to follow up on this, because I know it's a highly important compliance verification thing and regulatory thing, mycotoxins, okay? So they are aiming to work more on developing proper sampling plans. I'm not going into the details, but we know all, if we have a bad sample, everything we are doing after it is to be thrown away, okay? And if we're taking decisions based on bad sampling and then a bad analytical technique, so our decisions are void, right? So they are trying to work more on developing a proper sampling for these, what we call them, heterogeneous contaminants, the mycotoxins. And that is for CCMAS. So are we still, you're starting to be bored about the, or still interesting? we're finishing. Okay, still a few minutes, okay? So it's not an easy thing we're doing here. We're reviewing a long list, but it's interesting. Okay, and very quickly, the committee that met last week, CCRVDF. So just a few titles for you. They agreed to retain maximum residue limits for fumagillin in fish and honey at step 7, meaning they are waiting for more data, etc., to adopt it at step 8. So if you're interested by vet drug residues, please go and check the report that was adopted last Friday. Extrapolation of maximum residue limits for camelides, and this extrapolation work is very important within CCRVDF. So we do not have enough data. We cannot do the same evaluation for every vet drug and every commodity. they developed a strategy, very scientific based, to extrapolate the maximum residue limit to another commodity. Extrapolation to edible offals tissues other than liver and kidney. Risk-based actions following detection of residues caused by feed carryover. So also an interesting item to follow up on. The carryover of the vet drug residue from the feed to the food, to the animal, then to the food. And they took a decision related to some vet drug residues in, I believe, eggs. So now that one was endorsed. They have new maximum residue levels or action levels for nicarbazine and lasalocide in chicken eggs. And a certain important work also for you to know, it's the electronic working group is meeting, I guess, in upcoming months. It's the joint working group between CCRVDF and CCPR. Very interesting to harmonize between the work of these two committees. So these are the past. We're not going into details, but just for you to know that we have two upcoming committees, right? So we are aiming for CCFA in the upcoming weeks. So just going through I know you're tired, so just going through the agenda and one more slide. Okay, so CCFA, it's important to know what we're about to discuss. So they will be discussing the outcomes of GFA's 100th meeting. You know, GFA meets one time to evaluate additives, another time to evaluate contaminants, another time to evaluate vet drug residues. So the last one for additives was the 100th meeting, and unfortunately, and I'm not disclosing anything, it's mentioned in the documents of Codex, GFA is having some difficulties organizing expert meetings, and they are saying this. Okay, that's why we are seeing perhaps less frequency of meetings, and without a GFA meeting, we cannot do any work in these committees. So that's very important also to know. They are facing some issues. So they met for additives. So we will have we have the list. Okay, if you're interested, we can go and check it. What was evaluated, etc. We have alignment, as I was speaking, of food additive provisions, the general standard of food additives, revision of international numbering systems. If we have any proposals from countries to add, revoke a new additive, so that's CCFA work to give it an INS number, etc. Okay, so GSFA working practices and template, and a very interesting new discussion paper that will be discussed related to novel foods to cell-based food safety assessment guidelines. So I think we will be bringing this discussion during the upcoming days also. So it's a proposal from Singapore. And we are finishing with CCFL. So here, if our Canadian colleagues would help me a bit just for a few seconds or a few minutes to introduce, since we are lucky to have the CCFL Secretariat with us, and we will be finishing with this. Just to introduce what we're looking for. And we have some interesting items, of course, from the agenda. Thank you, Alison.
Thank you very much. So Nancy and myself were part of the CCFL Secretariat. So we've been preparing for the meeting, and what we can tell you is, so I'm going to talk about agenda item 2.1 and 4 together. So as Amin mentioned earlier, every commodity standard that gets developed will go to specific other horizontal codex committees for endorsement. So, and one of those is the labeling committee. So as part of this, any commodity standard will be reviewed by the CCFL to make sure that it is in line with the horizontal text. So for example, there's a general standard for the labeling of prepackaged food, and this outlines what the mandatory labeling, all of those requirements are. So for example, common name, net weight, any date marking provisions. And as we can see, one of those mandatory provisions in the general standard is country of origin. So as Amin mentioned earlier, there is discussion on the use of country of harvest. So one commodity standard that came through also had country of harvest being a mandatory requirement. And so there was some ongoing discussion whether or not this is in line with the existing horizontal standards, what the justification for it is, what the need for it is. And Amina's already outlined a lot of that, but that's going to be under discussion at the upcoming CCFL, as well as other labeling provisions from other commodity standards for endorsement. And I'll pass the microphone to Nancy for the cautionary allergen labeling.
Thanks. Just to mention that for the cautionary allergen labeling, what we're aiming to have is finalize and set for adoption the guidance on cautionary allergen labeling. So the what still needs to be finalized is sections on when the use PAL, also the table of reference doses for the different allergens. And then there's stuff around as well. PAL and gluten-free claims as well, and the presentation of PAL on food packaging. I also want to flag there's two other agenda items 6 and 7, which are both joint presentations and in multi-pack formats, and so that one's more about I guess labeling, the clarity in labeling when you have different
multi-pack.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Multi-units and then different items within a package sort of thing. Then there's the agenda item on food labeling provisions in emergency situations, which it's really about like what's and this stems from, I guess, what happened during COVID-19 and what was deemed necessary in terms of labeling provisions around that. Also, I'm not sure, I didn't see this listed here, but one of the new work proposals that's coming up is on alcohol labeling.
Yes.
That could be of interest to our peers. And this is kind of in response to I guess guidelines that WHO had identified in back a couple of years ago. And so this is just a follow-up on that. And so there is a proposal for something to work around.
Thank you so much, Nancy. Thank you, Alistair. And that would be the ending of this presentation. Hopefully it was useful, and thank you so much for your attention.